Auspicious greetings, everybody. Welcome. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker for this evening, Shannon Jordan. It's wonderful to have her here. Shannon and I met about a year ago at a writing retreat in Baja. And when we met and she told me what she did, I thought at that time that she would be an amazing speaker for us to have. So it's wonderful to have her here. Shannon is the Director of Programs and Operations at UCSD Center for Mindfulness. She specializes in translating the science underlying mindful awareness, well-being, and human flourishing into interactive learning experiences to support mental and emotional health. Shannon holds a BA in business, an MA in counseling psychology, and is also a board certified coach. Her talk today is titled From Stress to Serenity, a Mindful Approach to Wellness. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Uh, Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here with you all, and thank you for that kind introduction. Uh, Mute myself. How's that? Please let us know if you can't hear at any time. I'm going to do both the Zoom and the audience. So if I'm too loud for the Zoomers, um, hopefully you know that's just because I want everyone in the room to be able to hear. I don't mean to be shouting at the Zoomers. Anyways, we are part of the Centers for Integrative Health. We study the mind-body connection. Some of you might be familiar with UC San Diego Health. We have been in existence for about 15 years now, and I have been serving as a teacher for the last 9 years and have come on most recently to be one of the directors of the center. And you all are already mindfulness practitioners by the very fact that you're here at the Sangha. But what I'd like to share with you is a little bit about the work that we do in organizations, how we introduce the concepts of attention and awareness, and the implications those have for our health and well-being. And so we really look at how we can help advance human flourishing. And we think that the mental and the emotional skills are at the core of being able to be our most personal and professionally effective and resilient through life. And that relates to increased well-being for our communities at large. So that's a little bit about the center and our mission. We work with the general public, our local communities. We have programs for educators, law enforcement personnel, healthcare providers, and so forth. And I think you all might agree that when we're talking about wellness and well-being, it's an inner game, right? It starts with our own hearts and minds. And the extent that we are aware of our habits and our perceptions and our assumptions, our thoughts, our emotions, and to the extent that we can work with those skillfully helps us manage our stress and well-being. So we like to say it's an inner game, and that's where mindfulness, of course, comes in. There's a lot of well-being models out there, and I won't spend too much time on this. We looked at the Gallup well-being model. We came up with our own at UC San Diego Health. And if you think about your own well-being and the different factors that contribute to that, if I asked every one of you what contributes to your well-being, you might name some of these things, right? Having access to nature, being in a community with arts and music and creativity, being of service to one another, feeling like you belong and like you're included, right? There's social and community components of well-being. And of course, there's physical components of well-being. So being able to work with our breath effectively, movement and exercise, nutrition, and monitoring our energy and our sleep and so forth. And then there's career. So being able to provide for ourselves and our families, being able to use our strengths and our talents in the world, learning something new, feeling like we're contributing and that we're motivated. And then a lot of people say that a sense of purpose brings them well-being, finding meaning, living your values, being able to reflect, feeling connected to something greater than yourselves. And at the heart of it, and this is where we didn't see a lot of the well-being models going, mental and emotional well-being. And that's where our minds come in, right? Being able to work with your minds effectively is really at the core. And if you don't have that, it's difficult, I think you might agree, to realize some of these other components of well-being. And so, in the 40 minutes that I have, 50 minutes, I'd love to share a little bit about the emerging science of stress, what we're finding from the work we're doing at UC San Diego Health, as well as some of our sister schools. A lot of the research that I'll present today comes from the Center for Aging and Metabolism up at UC San Francisco, the work of Alyssa Epple. So we'll look at some of that research on stress. We'll also look at the role of mindful awareness and how that can be a friend and an ally in managing our own stress. And then I'd like to suggest 6 strategies that we can all use to increase our feelings of well-being. So does this sound like a good agenda for us? And then we'll have lots of time, I hope, for questions and discussion after. All right. So you all are mindfulness practitioners already and students of mindfulness, as am I. And I think we could all agree a definition of mindfulness is present moment attention and awareness, right? It sounds so easy, but I think anyone who's been in that meditation room that I was just in knows that it's not so easy. And so, what I'd love to do is just invite you into a little test. And those of you who are with me online, please join me in this. I'd like you to go ahead and close your eyes if you're comfortable, or just adopt a soft gaze ahead. And I'm going to time you for 45 seconds. And I want you just to think of one thing and hold that in your mind's eye. It could be your pet. It could be your favorite vacation spot. It could be what you're making for dinner tomorrow night. It doesn't matter what it is, but I want you to hold one thought in your mind for 45 seconds. Everyone clear? Everyone have something? Okay, I'm going to start the timer and we'll begin. And that's 45 seconds. You can open your eyes if they were closed. So how did that go? And I may be talking with a biased group because you've already meditated this today. But I'm curious, what did you find? What did you notice?
Started thinking about one thing and then I went to another thing.
You started thinking about one thing and then the mind had
Yeah.
bing,
Yes.
mind of its own. Yes. Did anyone share in that experience? See a few nods. Yes. Yes. So I don't know if you know this because I certainly didn't, but we humans have an attention span which is now less than that of a goldfish. Anyone want to guess? Do you believe it? Not happy about this. Anyone want to guess? Yeah, well, we'll talk about the culprits. You're right on that. Absolutely. But how many seconds?
20.
Oh, you're very optimistic. 9 seconds. And the mind starts wandering. And where are we going in our minds? Anywhere, right? But very typically, we're rehashing something that happened in the past, a conversation, what we just ate, what we did yesterday, something that happened, something that was upsetting, or we're talking or we're thinking, mind wandering into the future, right? So ruminating, sometimes at worst catastrophizing, which we'll talk about, planning, strategizing, dreaming, but our minds are rarely in the present moment, correct? We can all agree that this is something that we have to work on. And this research comes out of Harvard, and I'll share a little bit more about this later, but our minds wander 47% of the time. Almost half of the time, our minds are somewhere else other than the present moment. And I think we could all agree that the world we find ourselves in only feeds that distracted mind. And our technology adds to that. So these are pre-pandemic statistics. They may have just gotten worse. They may have gotten better. I'm not sure, but we check our phones on average 87 times per day. 40% of us check our phones within 5 minutes of waking up. It's your alarm. Yeah. Yes. And we're going to talk about that because we know that cortisol is highest in the morning, and when we have an alarm on our phone and then we get a glimpse of the morning news, that just tends to shoot the cortisol up. So it does take a toll on our well-being. But it's so difficult not to do, isn't it? 50% of us check our phones during the night, especially if it's on the bedstand. And 87% admit that they will check while talking to family or friends. 70% of us allow ourselves to be distracted by an incoming email or chat. And the neuroscience tells us that it takes 67 seconds to return back to the original task. So we're just depleting our productivity when we're allowing our attention to oscillate like that. 50% of us check email when on vacation or in bed. There is also a bathroom statistic that I won't share here. And on average, we spend 147 minutes on social media each day. So why are we talking about this at UC San Diego Health and in our mindfulness community? Because I think mindfulness is more important than ever, right? To be able to work with the ecosystem we find ourselves in with the technology. It's not going anywhere. Our minds are about 40, 50,000 years old, right? We have all the original hardware as humans, and we're not really adapted to the technological times. So it's more important than ever to learn to work with our minds. And so let me just ask you, if you were to acknowledge some of those statistics I just shared, what's the impact of all this distractedness? What do you encounter? It's stressful.
I have using the computer for years. It took me a long time to get there. Did not have a smartphone for years. Now I have a smartphone. So I have to look at myself and say, okay, how much time are you spending? Especially, I get too many emails. Oh my God, I gotta, unsubscribe. So I have those on my computer. Then I have whatever's coming into my phone. And I look at them and I have so many emails. My font is this big. And today I thought, let it be, but it is stressful and trying to keep up. I was in problems keeping up with things anyway.
Yes. Yes.
So it just,
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And for those of you on Zoom, we have a participant who's talking about how stressful the loads and loads of emails can be that come in every day. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you said something very wise, and I'm going to come back to you when we get to one of our strategies. You said, let it be. And we're going to talk about the wisdom in that. How about anyone online? Anyone want to share the impact of all of this distractedness? Just wanted to make sure to check in if there are any comments.
I think that depended on the chat.
Oh, they have to put it in the chat. Sab is checking.
So it just,
Yeah, okay. Feel free if you have any questions or comments as we go through this to please chat in and Saba will check it. Time away from each other, another impact. Absolutely.
he says we should fix the TV.
More TV, less cell phone? Yes.
Or juggling to shopping and on the phone all the time. Like, are you either on the phone or
Ah,
shopping?
yes,
How many of us? I think all of us have seen.
yes.
I mean, I don't do it, but
Thank you.
shopping and on the phone and you're hearing their conversations like, what?
And for those of you on Zoom, we're talking about the multitasking that
Yeah.
people do while shopping. They're on their phone. I was on a train the last couple days, and everyone was just talking on their phone and riding along at the same time. Yes, in the back.
With younger, with teenagers and kids, where I see a lot of, they're trying to compete, kind of keep up with the Joneses,
Yes.
and also, social activities.
Sure. Absolutely. Some social awkwardness, keeping up, trying to stay connected. And we know that there is a loneliness epidemic, right? Even in a hyper-connected world, we're feeling less connected than ever. Yeah. And so, do we have a chat?
Zoom as well was isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling isolated. Yes. And Max?
Yeah, just if we expand a little bit into like how the social media works, they connect into this loop of you checking the phone, and so this first creates anxiety, and second makes you ride high on the what is the hormone of happiness?
Dopamine.
Yeah,
Dopamine. The
Yeah.
dopamine hormone.
So
Yes. Yes.
there is
Absolutely. And we have a participant speaking to the dopamine addiction that we feel when we constantly feel that urge to check, which is again where mindfulness comes in, right? Noticing that urge arise and instead of reacting, choosing, right, in that moment.
That the brain cannot distinguish between, social media on cell phone and a street level.
Yeah, yes, it's the same biochemicals of addiction. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very interesting that we all are noticing the impact that these social devices have on us. And again, I invite you to keep in mind how mindfulness can serve your well-being in the midst of all of these technological tools. Let me move forward, and let me see if I may get rid of this. I don't know how to minimize that.
Can you drag it up?
Can I drag it? I can drag it. So some of you might know the book Buddha's Brain by neuropsychologist Rick Hanson. He is a student of the insight tradition, and he says the mind is like Velcro for negative, and Teflon. We don't have a lot of Teflon pans anymore, but you know what I mean. The eggs just slip right off the Teflon pan. For positive, why is it important to know this? right? Because our minds are not necessarily balanced, right? That the dopamine fix that we get from the latest negative news alert really grabs our attention and tends to stick around. We tend to be more attracted to the doom scrolling and so forth. Those negative things really get our attention. And, Saiba and I were saying that we met at a writer's retreat, and I like to use the example that our friend who has published several books uh, got some reviews online, and most of them were glowing reviews. Everyone loved the book, and she got one that was not so glowing. And what do you think was the one that really kept her up at night? It was the negative one. Yeah, absolutely. And we can replace that example with a performance review at work or feedback that you've gotten or any number of different life events where we tend to really focus on that negativity. That the negativity bias is actually the scientific word, right, that we have. And this is an evolutionary trait, right? It paid off for our ancestors to know what would harm us, to really hone in on where the snake lived, behind which boulder, right? So we could avoid that. So it paid off much more than it did to just remember the things that felt good, because we wouldn't be alive to live another day, right? And so this has an evolutionary root, this negativity bias. But this is again where mindfulness comes in, recognizing when you might be in a negative thought loop or when a certain train of thought may not be serving your well-being. How can you serve as a witness to that and work with it more skillfully? So it's about really bringing some balance because our thoughts aren't free, right? Our thoughts take a pretty extensive toll on the mind and the body. And that's very small print, but it says, I can't worry about that now. I'm worrying about something else.
That's perfect.
Right? And there's this, some of you probably know this. I think in many different Buddhist traditions, this is told, the parable of the second arrows, right? So the first arrow is some sort of stressful event, a death, a loss, a financial setback, some sort of natural disaster, for example. And that hurts and we notice it and it's painful. But we humans are very unique in that we keep reliving that experience long after it's over. And when scientists study other mammals, we're very unique in this. There's a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Right? The lion comes and attacks the herd, and the zebras run, and then the lion leaves, and the zebras go back to grazing. They don't sit there thinking, why did I come to this field today? I'm so stupid. I shouldn't have done that. I should have been watching. Right. And so we have a way of shooting a lot of arrows at ourselves, don't we? I can't believe this, or the rumination, the what if, the worst case scenarios, the why did I, didn't I, all the self-criticism, the blaming of others, or anyone get stuck in analysis paralysis, right? Just spinning all the possibilities in your head. So, again, mindfulness, that awareness that a thought pattern perhaps is not serving our well-being can be a very useful skill. So let's talk a little bit more about the role of awareness, because we have a lot of ways that we humans can deal with stress effectively. But I would venture to say we are rarely able to deal with our stress without mindful awareness. Because if you don't know that you've been triggered or that you're ruminating, if you aren't able to witness your own experience, then you will stay in that instead of responding perhaps more wisely. And so you all are learning to train the mind, right? Directing the mind to an object like the breath or a task at hand, just like we did in the meditation earlier this evening. And then awareness. So being able to be aware of your thoughts, your feelings, your physical sensations, your surroundings, right? So we're able to zoom in and direct our attention. We're able to zoom out and become aware of the playing field, of what we have, of what's going on for us, of what's going on around us. And then there's this meta attention, right? Different from meta, not loving kindness meta, but meta as in awareness itself, right? So knowing that our attention has wandered, and we are very unique as humans that we are able to bring our attention back, right? We know when the attention has wandered and when we were supposed to be thinking of something and our mind wandered, and then we're able to escort it back. And we know if we were to look under the hood, and I don't have this slide, but we're activating our prefrontal cortex whenever we are training our attention, right? And the rest of the time, depending on what we've been distracted by, the default mode network is activated, right? Whether it's a sound or a scent or a memory or a physical sensation. If we were to look under the hood in an fMRI scan, we would see the mind is lighting up all over the place, that we really do feel distracted. And so we have this unique ability to train the mind and train our attention. And of course, there's formal ways of training our mindfulness, sitting meditation, walking meditation, body scan, mindful movement, journaling, reflection. And there's informal ways, of course. And these are limitless, right? They're infinite. Every moment can be a mindful moment. So sitting on the train, driving in traffic, taking a walk, having a conversation, brushing your teeth, eating a meal, right? We all can be students of mindfulness in everyday moments. And this, I think, is really where the magic comes in, because you may not always have a cushion. You may not always have a quiet space. You may be in the throes of something really stressful, and being able to access that inner calm is a gift and a skill. And so that awareness really comes in, and I know in many different Buddhist traditions, this is described differently, but thoughts, feelings, body sensations, these are the things that we can be aware of. And there's a very accessible little mindfulness exercise that I like to invite people to, and I might invite you all. So just looking around, name or just name to yourself 5 things that you can see in this moment. So you might see colors, you might see lights, you might see texture. So go ahead and look around. Chair, a person, a bag, a cup, a pen. 5 things that you can see. About 4 things that you can touch. So you might feel the points of contact your body is making with the chair, your foot on the shoe or the sock, your hands on your lap. You might bring your hand to your face or the table. So the sense of touch you're engaging mindfully. And then how about 3 things you can hear? Traffic outside, the sound of my voice, the hum of the projector, a bird, a plane. Just notice what comes into hearing. And then maybe 2 things you can smell. The kitchen's not so far away. We just had dinner. Maybe there's a restaurant outside. Maybe there's a scent of a flower, someone's cologne. And how about taste? Maybe there's a residual taste in the mouth from a drink or what you ate earlier, digestion. And so just a quick little exercise to embrace and touch into mindfulness in any one moment through the senses. And so you can do this very stealthily. No one needs to know you're doing it. But when the mind does go into a negative space, right, when thoughts are difficult to deal with, coming to our senses is always an accessible tool. And so you all have had a mindfulness practice already um, this evening. And I think what I'd like to do, since we did that little awareness practice, is just to invite you to move with me into the strategies, and then we will do a breath practice um, a little bit in just a few minutes. And so another little micro practice that we talk a lot about is a simple acronym, STOP. Right? When you do find you've been triggered by a stressor, stop, take a breath. We know that that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, right? It allows us to access that state or calm, observe what's happening for me and my thoughts, my emotions, my surroundings, and what's the most skillful means in this moment? How might I proceed? How might I respond versus reacting? And so when we work with people in organizations, we often will leave them with this very simple micro practice to just stop. And so if we were to look at the many different scientific studies around mindfulness, and there are literally thousands now, it really began in the 70s here in the United States. It grew very, very slowly. And in the early 2000s, it really escalated. And we see scientific evidence for the effects of mindfulness on our physical well-being, boosting our immune system, building our tolerance to stress, even enhancing performance and resilience as we're able to direct the mind and our attention accordingly, enhance brain functioning, serve our well-being. As we work with our attention, we increase our ability to build our memory. I've done a lot of workshops on how mindfulness can enhance creativity, right? Because we become aware of when we're preoccupied with a particular train of thought, or when we're stuck and we need to zoom out and calm the mind, quiet the mind in order to get the aha moments. Decision making, there's some very interesting studies around decision making and ethics and mindfulness. We know that if we can skillfully work with the heart and the mind, that we're able to alleviate feelings of depression, ADHD, anxiety. We can increase emotional intelligence, work performance, happiness. This is my favorite. And there's actually a study that was done back in 2010. And some of you may be familiar with this. This came out of the work of Killingsworth and his colleagues at Harvard. And they wrote a white paper called A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And in order to do their scientific study, what they did is they gave participants an app. Yes, they used technology. And the app pinged these participants several times throughout the day. And when they were pinged, they were asked, "What are you doing? Are you paying attention? And how do you feel?" And what the researchers found was it didn't matter what the participants were doing. They could have been gardening or doing the dishes or doing laundry or working on a presentation or in a conversation. What mattered to their feelings of subjective happiness and well-being is whether or not they were actually paying attention to what they were doing. So when they were doing dishes or laundry, were they feeling the water on their skin? Were they feeling the feel of the texture of the fabric? When they were in a conversation, were they truly listening, or was the mind wandering about what they should have said or what they were going to make for dinner, right? So it's that attention that really made a difference to happiness and well-being. And this key study got a lot of attention in itself and set the pathway for many other scientific studies around mindfulness and the value of attention. Yes.
I'm confused about this study
Yeah.
because if they're putting you, breaking your
Yes.
attention in the present moment, right? Was the expectation to respond immediately or to respond when you have a moment to get there?
Yes. So the expectation, it's a very good question. And it did have it did have this technological tool that was used. So they were asked in that moment, had they been paying attention to what they were doing? Right. So they had to report what they were doing and what were they thinking about right before they got pinged. Were they actually paying attention to the task? Yeah. Yes, yes. Well, maybe. And maybe there were several instances where they forgot the ping. But these participants were instructed to once they hear that, once they see that, then they need to check in that moment. What were they doing? Were they paying attention and so forth? And so, yeah, some limitations because technology was used, but also that technology gave us a glimpse into real life moments 24/7. Um, and so it led to some interesting results. And so let's look at some of the strategies. And I want to come back to something that you said, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But when we look at the work around well-being and what we can do to manage our stress levels, embracing uncertainty, right? Being able to be a student of uncertainty and build our uncertainty muscle because it's a defining characteristic of our time today, right? Of the world that we live in. Things are more complex, they're more ambiguous than ever. And so being able to be with that discomfort in our bodies and our minds of uncertainty, to be able to work with that skillfully can help boost our well-being. So embracing uncertainty, letting go of what we can't control, right? We humans, when we feel uncertain, often will over-index on trying to hold on tighter and control something even more. And so letting go of what we can't control is a key strategy in boosting our well-being. It's easier said than done, right? It's looking at all those things that we have the ability to influence, those things that we do not, and choosing to prioritize our energy toward those things that do. And there's a quick little micro practice that we often share using the breath. So breathing in, I did my best. Breathing out, I let go of the rest. I personally use this several times a day. Right. Breathing in, I did my best. Breathing out, I let go of the rest. So maybe this will help you with those emails. The third strategy that we want to invite you to think about, reframing threats into challenges. There are so many challenges. Yes. So if you think about it, anxiety and excitement feel very similar in the body. Physical sensations are quite similar. And it's often our interpretation of an event that leads to the nervous system kicking in and being able to calm that excitement or that anxiety or escalating it further. Right? So to the extent that we can reframe, now if there was a true life-threatening challenge, our hardwiring would kick in and we would do what we needed to do. But I'm talking about the paper tigers, right? The everyday challenges that we get triggered by and we find ourselves reacting to. So can we observe our reactivity and think of some sort of threat as a challenge? How might I look at this difficult conversation? How might I lean in here? How might I have courage? How might I challenge myself to get through this? And so reframing threats into challenges. And again, that's where mindfulness comes in. It's often our interpretation of an event that helps us appraise it as a challenge or a threat, right? Leveraging the power of nature. It's no coincidence the Buddha found enlightenment under a tree, right? We are nature. And we're so removed from it these days. I look around this beautiful room and I see the bonsai and I see the bamboo and I see the plants that you all care for. And the work coming out of UC San Francisco really speaks to the need for us to get out into nature as much as we can, even if it's just tending a house plant, even if it's feeling the sun on your face, the wind on your skin, um, to the extent that we can get back into nature, we find that the mind becomes more creative, more calm, and we get out of that negative thought loop and the monkey mind that we often find ourselves in. And then the next strategy is don't just relax, restore. So what the science tells us is that we are so overstimulated these days by our technology, by our 24/7 schedules, by our workloads, that it's often not enough to just relax on the couch on a Saturday night, that we have to really go below our baseline in order to restore ourselves. Meditation can be very restorative. Sleep can be very restorative. Going on retreat into nature in solitude can be very restorative. But we don't always have those. We're not always able to do that kind of deep restoration. And so there is some emerging science around working with the breath. And let me see if I have a slide for that. Yeah. So, the science tells us that if we make the exhale a bit longer than the inhale, that we activate that restorative nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. So I might invite you just to join me, and some of you may know the technique of box breathing. So this is a modified version of that. So breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4, and breathing out for a count of 8. Once again, breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4, and breathing out for a long, slow count of 8. And do that a couple times now on your own, in your own cadence, your own rhythm. So let me invite you to open your eyes now if they were closed. Just notice how you feel. Let the exhale a little bit longer. And some of you might know this technique. You may already do some breath work. But this is an easy way to access that nervous system. And the last and sixth strategy is making sure that we are bringing intention to the beginning of our day and the end of our day, right? So noticing the quality of our thoughts, our emotions, bookending our day with positive emotions to counterbalance that negativity bias, right? So waking up in the morning, maybe recalling thinking about two things that you're looking forward to in any given day. And at the end, before you go to sleep, recalling three things that you're grateful for. Maybe something in yourself, something someone did for you, maybe something you're grateful for. But if we can intentionally work with the mind in a positive way, by bookending our day, that can also help increase our positive emotions and therefore our well-being. And so I'll just leave you with some everyday tips. So, starting your day with a mindful check-in. So, when you awake in the morning, just noticing, how am I feeling? What am I thinking? What's the quality of my emotions? What's my physical body feel like? Really using your mindfulness. We talk a lot about multitasking, but we rarely talk about unitasking, right? So paying attention to one thing at a time and challenging ourselves to do that in this day and age, right? So really being present with your food, tasting your food, being present on your walk. We're usually walking to get somewhere and we're thinking about what we're going to say when we get there. But what might it be like to just walk and feel the sensations of that? Turning off notifications whenever you can so you're not pinged and disturbed throughout the day, especially when your attention needs to be protected. Taking 3 deep breaths and perhaps making a longer exhale when you do find yourself reacting to some sort of a stressor. Checking your attention throughout the day. I used to have a little post-it on my computer screen that says, "Where is your mind?" Right? Where is my mind now? Am I actually in the Zoom call? Or is my mind wandering? Eating a meal mindfully, right? Taking a walk outside, feeling those sensations. And we talked a little bit about reflection as a well-being strategy when I presented some of the work on well-being, journaling 10 minutes every morning or evening. What am I feeling in this moment? Just witnessing your own experience. And then, of course, bringing in gratitude. What am I grateful for today? We have a lot of complementary resources for the community. And when I say community, I mean our international community. So you can use this QR code that'll take you to the UC San Diego Center for Mindfulness website. And there is a tab that says audio practices. And there are a variety of different meditations that our various teachers have recorded. It might be complementary to the meditations that you're familiar with. So things like mindfulness of breath, body scan, self-compassion. You'll find a variety of different meditations, some yoga, and so forth. So I invite you to use our resources freely and let us be a partner to you in your mindfulness journey. And so with that, I'll stop the share. And I just want to thank you all. Thank you all on Zoom for your attention. And thank you all in this room. I'm going to populate the chat here and see if there's anything I missed. But perhaps before we have our marriage, should we have time for questions? Thank you, Dean. Yeah, multitasking is not really possible. It's better described as scattertasking. Absolutely. That's exactly right. The neuroscience tells us just that. We're just rapidly shifting our attention, and that can be exhausting to our well-being. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for naming that. All right. Yes.
Yeah, but getting back to journaling, I read somewhere there was a study that said that it's better to write things out rather than to type them in because just the fluid motion cursive. But then I happen to think there's a whole generation that doesn't know how to do cursive anymore. It's too bad. Yeah.
It's required in school.
Yes, absolutely. And so for those of you on Zoom, one of the participants was saying that for journaling, the mindful exercise can actually be in putting the pen to the page, right? And in reflecting. And there is some science around that. It taps into our interoception, which is that coordination between the mind and the body in a way that typing does not. Yeah. Yes.
But started using fountain pens. Fountain pens.
Oh, fountain pen. Ah.
And it just feels so much better.
Yeah.
So writing it, so it was more like an art, I guess. You know, instead of just the pencil.
And that's such an example of informal practice of mindfulness, right? Just the writing in itself, the feeling of the pen on the page and the pen in the hand and so forth. Yeah. Thank you.
A quick question. For example, you're feeling stressed in that moment when you have to journal. Do you have to wait, or do you have to acknowledge that, you know, you're feeling stressed and maybe write down that? Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yes, the research around journaling that I'm recalling it gave participants the instruction to write down whatever you were feeling, to be able to observe and witness and get your feelings on paper was important in the journaling process itself. Yeah, absolutely. Sub?
Thank you so much. Um, I'm wondering, like, do you have any advice for how to not make some of the mindful tasks into tasks? You know,
Say more about that. How to
like
make,
how we tend to turn everything into work. And
yes.
so it's like, oh, now I have to journal for 10 minutes, or now
Oh,
I better go for a walk. You know, it becomes like a punishment almost
yes, yes.
instead of actually, huh? Yeah. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So that for those of you on Zoom, I'm sure you heard Saba. So it was a question around we're also high performing individuals, right? And we want to do a task correctly. And so we can apply that same performance anxiety to mindful journaling or mindful walking. Yeah, so the invitation is just to allow, right? To allow yourself to be truly in the moment without judgment about the outcome, right? So how it's supposed to go, because there's no perfection in mindfulness. Right? It's really that's why we call it mindfulness practice, not mindfulness perfect. Yeah.
I wonder if you would take a minute or two to talk about mindfulness stress reduction program that are offered by HTSB and
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Yes. Yes, yes, thank you. And I know you've taken the mindfulness-based stress reduction. So mindfulness-based stress reduction is one of the most empirically studied science-based mindfulness programs. It was developed by John Kabat-Zinn in the 1970s. He had a PhD in molecular biology and got participants who had issues with chronic pain that the medical system had given up on and invited them into the basement of a medical building and said, let's work on your chronic pain through mindfulness. And 35, 40 years later, this curriculum is still used not just for chronic pain, but for chronic stress, for anxiety, for the challenges we all face in life. It's an 8-week class that's online or in person, and you learn to work with the breath and the body and your perception. Um, you invite in various attitudes, um, such as non-judgment, right? And patience and non-striving and acceptance, right? So it's also how are we relating to our everyday experiences experiences in life that's part of the curricula. So mindfulness-based stress reduction is something that we offer through UCSD. It's also offered around the world, and you can find it by that acronym. And so thank you for mentioning that. We have mindfulness-based cognitive therapy as well, and we have mindful self-compassion based on the work of Chris Germer and Kristen Neff. Yeah, and then a variety of other workshops. We're also introducing mindfulness-based sustainable transformation, an eco-awareness course through the Center for Mindfulness to help us relate to climate anxiety and the world around us. Yeah. So thank you for the question. Yes.
Because you have so many demands, seemingly at the same time. Take a breath, and what you still have those demands. So what do you do? Like, do you start prioritizing? I'm just thinking like my everyday job. Like I have a patient there. I got like messages coming in. I got someone knocking my door. I got another doctor waving at me. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I mean, but I will say that. I sometimes
Yes.
say, oh, the patient got in the chair. Sorry about the ridiculous right now. And then I start answering whatever's word.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for those of you on Zoom, so a very good question. So the question was, what happens when I'm at work and I have these demands and I have this patient and I have this individual and I have the technology, right? I mean, you could put that example in any work setting, right? We find ourselves in the throes of having to react. Mindfulness allows us to stop and pause, right? It's not without that moment of awareness that we can respond wisely to that situation in any form. We just react like a pinball machine. And so mindfulness allows us to stop, take a breath, and again, that activates that parasympathetic nervous system, observe, and that observe might relate to the intention or the priority. What's most important now?
Mm-hmm.
This person in front of me or this task? But quieting the mind allows you to perhaps just maybe 10% more focus in on that one thing that is most important, because you can't do it all.
No.
Right? And we cannot multitask to the extent that we think we can. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
My environment encourages scattered.
Our environments encourage scatter tasking 100%. Yeah, we work with people in corporations and organizations all day. And that's exactly right. We have to have a way to work with our minds. Otherwise, we're just reactive constantly. Yeah. And, I might suggest that I'll never forget this example that I worked for a consulting firm that was started by someone who had a long tradition in mindfulness. And he said, when I'm in the back of a taxi, I won't multitask on my phone, because do you really want my answer on an email if I'm rushing to the airport? He said, it's okay to say, I'm taking a pause, or I'm going to attend to this later, or I'm going to let this go, or let this be. So when I am in a calmer state of mind, I'm going to attend to it. And I always thought, my goodness, this person was a CEO of a company. And he was sharing that example with how he stopped and paused and made a choice to serve his own well-being and the person on the other end of that receiving message, right? And so, yeah, it's a superpower, I think, that mindfulness that we can all embrace. I'm sensitive to time. I would love to stay here with you all.
We
Yeah.
have 1 more minute, so maybe
One more question. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe just myself, I'm not very in tune with feelings, but one of the mindful activities was to do a check-in in the morning with how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Usually in my mind, feelings are something you feel when an event happens or it's triggered by something. Otherwise, you're just there.
Autopilot.
Neither. Like, so
Mhm.
I have an app that asks me, how are you feeling this morning? And I'm neither excited for the day nor am I like, it's just factual, like I need to wake up, I need to get out of bed, I need to do this. And there's nothing that causes feeling.
Yeah, neutral, right? Pleasant, neutral, unpleasant.
Sure, yeah.
Neutral is a choice. I mean, it could be that in this moment I'm feeling that.
Every day.
Just to notice that, right? Notice when there is a pleasant emotion, when there is an unpleasant emotion. Notice when there is a neutral emotion. Because I think we get enough of them on either end, right? But wanting or looking for something that isn't there isn't serving either,
Right.
right? So just acknowledging what is, maybe allowing.
So if your pattern is the same
Mm-hmm.
every day, it almost feels like it's not something to acknowledge.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I would invite you to look at each day differently, right? I think our assumption is that tomorrow will be the same as today, and it may be, or it may not. And so just allowing and being open to that. Emotions are difficult, right? Most of the time we're taught to stuff them, and we don't really have that sort of emotional fluency to describe what we're feeling. And so, just bringing a pen to page, whatever you're using on the app. I think with consistency, just noting what's real for you in this moment. And it doesn't have to be an emotion, it could be a physical sensation. What am I feeling? Yeah. Does that help?
We'll give it a shot.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm actually going stupid alarm. Feel like stupid alarm. Oh, like there's unpleasant feeling.
Yeah. So judging is there. Stupid alarm. Yeah. Yeah. Just acknowledging. Okay. What is in this moment? Ah, well,
Yeah.
if I may, I'm hearing that there is a difference when you wake up in the morning with a sunrise alarm.
Yes. I started using this after.
Ah, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. Good, good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And just a quick announcement
Thank
to
you.
everyone.
Thank you,
Our
everyone.
next TBIF will be on June 27th. And our speaker will be Dr. Jason Kornberg, who'll be speaking about psychiatry, mental health, and Buddhism. So I hope you all will join us. And thank you so much again, Shannon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor
Thank you for
Shannon.
tonight, and then
Nice
thank
to
you,
see everyone.
Shannon, for your